could you build everything that we do in Flow Orchestrator with flows? At some point, the answer was probably yes. Now I'll go to kind of a maybe. But it would be very brittle. You'd be adding fields to all kinds of records to try and capture these things. It wouldn't be composable or reusable.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Salesforce Under the Hood. My name is Susanna Plaisted, and I am here with Aaron Liebling, who is a principal software engineer at Salesforce. Aaron is actually someone who led the architectural design for Flow Orchestrator. So, Aaron, while we have you, I want to hear straight from the source. What is the origin story of this particular product?
Alex Edelstein, a VP of product inside Flow, he and I have worked together on a lot of things over the years. And at one point, 4-ish years ago, we were having a lot of discussions kind of on the limitations of Flow. And he and I are both strong fans of business process management, where we both love business process management, business process automation. It's why we both joined Salesforce individually. So we have a lot of conversations about Flow and its place and its limitations when you look at the more general BPM solutions out there in the world. And Flow Orchestrator was more or less a direct attempt to address that. It really started, I remember the very first conversation he and I had was literally in a dark room because we didn't want anyone to know that we were like planning this other thing. Because it's a fairly radical change. It's not all that often that you get to propose a completely new product at Salesforce and see it get adopted in the way that Flow Orchestrator has. So I think I can safely speak for Alex to say that we're both very excited.
So I'd love to hear a little bit about the technology behind Orchestrator and how it's different from Flow.
It's funny you say that because it's actually implemented under the hood with the Flow engine. So it is different, but it does also, there's very good reasons for those similarities. So I think I'll start answering that question by talking a little bit about Flow and why Flow is awesome. Most of your viewers probably know what Flow is really good at, right? Flow is great for discrete, small, individual business processes. I need to show a screen flow to someone and get their input. I need to record changes. I need to update another record and send an email to someone. All those things, Flow is beautiful, right? Like works really well. But obviously, what if you want to have a record update and then you want to update a couple records, and then you want to get some user input from someone, and you want to do something else, fire off something to an external service, and then show someone else something else. Trying to do a kind of a complex business use case with that. And the way I usually characterize them are very long-lived processes, multi-user processes, multi-record processes. I will say, could you build everything that we do in Flow Orchestrator with flows? At some point, the answer was probably yes. Now I'll go to kind of a maybe. But it would be really hard. You'd end up with a ton of bespoke objects. You'd end up with like a ton of bespoke, very specifically written code. It would be very brittle. You'd be adding fields to all kinds of records to try and capture these things. It wouldn't be composable or reusable in any fashion. So those are kind of the things that I think really characterize Flow Orchestrator, even though, as I said in the beginning, under the hood, they're both powered by the Flow engine. There's a lot of very specific hooks that allow this behavior by Flow Orchestrator, this long-lived behavior.
You spoke a little bit about composability, and within Well Architected, we talk about composability, but also about how to make sure that you're following the most direct path in engineering. So I think that's important for folks watching to understand. Like we have Flow, as you said, great for discrete small processes, but if you're looking to maybe orchestrate, sort of by the name, right? If you're looking to chain together these more long-lived processes, it sounds like Orchestrator might be the tool to look into.
Absolutely. And one of the things I like to talk about is, like I touched on briefly before, could you build this yourself? If you are an architect at a company or an ISV, going out and providing service to customers, could you build everything that Flow Orchestrator does for them? Probably, but again, you're going to be decorating their records. You're going to be, adding a bunch of very custom, bespoke, one-off stuff. It's going to be brittle. It's going to be hard to maintain. The goal of Flow Orchestrator is really to provide that in a package, right? We talk about it being a state machine. I like to think of it as a very powerful state machine. A state machine, what does it do? It takes inputs and the state changes based on that. Maybe gives you some outputs, right? New inputs come in, the state changes. That's really all Flow Orchestrator is. in quotation marks. But the same thing can be said of many systems. Architects in Salesforce are building state machines all the time. A state machine may consist of records, which are kind of holding the data, and then Apex actions or flows or all these other systems that act on those records. That's a state machine, right?
Right.
But it's a state machine made up of a bunch of individual pieces. There's no holistic organization to it, and that leads to difficulty to maintain, difficulty to upgrade, right? All of those costs. So again, by removing the need for the architect to build the state machine, it lets them just focus on the business logic.
Excellent. So I love that analogy, or that phrase that you use, that Flow Orchestrator is a powerful state machine. So let's unpack that a little bit with like the features that folks can leverage out of the box with Flow Orchestrator that make it that powerful state machine. And one thing, let's define our use of state, because I know state can mean a ton of different things depending on the context. So in this case, let's dive into that a little bit deeper.
Okay, so if you think about a flow, right, running, a flow has state, and even certain kinds of flows can actually be paused and maintain their state during that, right? But it's very limited, and it kind of, it is a minor, a state machine in some sense. It takes some inputs. Maybe its state changes, maybe it pauses for a little bit, the state resumes, and it goes. But it's very simplistic. It's not generally applicable. It's not really composable or expandable. And those were kind of the things that we were looking at with Flow Orchestrator. Flow Orchestrator very specifically has this notion of stages and steps, and the steps can have work items, which is work that gets assigned. For example, Susanna, if you have a form you need to fill out, or we're waiting for input from you, you would get a work item assigned to you. By having these generic objects, these are exactly the kind of things that I'm sure a lot of your architects are familiar with, and they've built these patterns into their own objects. If you have like a Boolean on a record that's like is ready, is confirmed, yep. Like is assigned to, right? Like waiting for so and so, right? All of these things, those are state, right? And those are the typical patterns that architects have been forced to use prior. Decorating records directly, firing off Apex actions, using flows to modify them. Very bulky, very bespoke. So we take all of that out. We give you these actions already prepared. We let you organize them then using Flow Builder, right? In a nice visual way that helps you see the flow of where everything's going to go instead of having 100 Apex actions scattered around. Which also actually brings me to one other thing I want to talk a little bit about is kind of the patterns that a architect should be using with Orchestrator.
Yeah,
is this a good time
absolutely.
to talk about that?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
Great. So I'll take it from two standpoints. One would be the consulting firm, for example, who's building for many customers. If you look at a flow orchestration, it consists of steps, and each step is actually implemented with a flow, right?
Right.
What that means is you could have a process like a returns process for a product, right? It comes in for shipping. Maybe they create a record which kicks everything off. This is the return record associated with an order, right? And maybe it's going to have to, get some verification to make sure that the return is valid. Maybe it has to, get some kind of approval from someone in some other department if it's above a certain value. The nice thing is you could build all of this, the orchestration, and you could even have implementations for each of those flows. Again, each step is a flow. But what you could also do is build the overall orchestration and essentially leave either blank spots or allow customization on the individual customer level. So maybe, for example, in the example of a returns, that exact process on whether it has to be approved by someone, right, based on dollar value or some other factor, that's going to differ by customer. One customer might say it's $500, another one might say it's $10,000 if it's something much more expensive. Someone else may say it's not based on dollar value at all; it's based on some other criteria. Because the underlying implementation of that step in the orchestration is a flow, you can change that out for different users, or the individual users could even change it out themselves. For example, you could provide that, you could build this overall package, which defines the overall business process.
Yep, and the orchestration itself, right?
Exactly. The individual companies could go in and say, oh, well, this flow, I want to tweak this flow, or I want to replace this flow with something else.
Got it. And that's templatizing. That's the ability to template orchestrations. Exactly. It's now available. Yes. Got it.
Exactly.
Got it.
So yes, you can templatize an orchestration, provide that out of the box to them, and then they can customize as needed. And then from the individual customer standpoint, of course, Similarly, because unlike a flow tends to, an orchestration will tend to involve many people across your company. It's going to involve another common example is an onboarding process. Onboarding involves HR, it involves your tech support, it might involve legal for visa issues or something. All of these different departments. You, as the admin who is building out the overall orchestration for the onboarding process, you're not the HR expert, you're not the legal expert, you're not the IT expert, right? So you can build the overall orchestration, and then again, you're going to have these spots where a flow needs to be inserted, but you can have someone who has that real bespoke knowledge for that area, the IT expert, especially if you're a larger company where you maybe have different admins handling different areas, right?
Mhm.
You can let someone else handle that. It also allows you to change one piece of the process without touching the overall process. You can tweak that IT process and it doesn't affect anything going on with HR or any of the other groups.
Got it. Right. Because each step or each piece of that, not each step, but each piece is an individual flow that is encapsulated in its own with its own
Exactly right, and
considerations.
can be versioned separately, can be activated separately, right?
Right, right. And I love what you said around the fact that, Flow is great for those single record actions or single user processes, where Orchestrator is good for the multi-user actions and business processes. So I have a question that actually just popped up as we were talking. I know that Flow, when it runs, the context that it runs in is dependent on how it was triggered, like for a record triggered flow, for example. For orchestrations, do we have more control over what context each flow runs in, and how does that work?
You do. So you're correct. Again, depending on the kind of flow, but many of the flows allow you to choose the context you want to run in. And orchestrations, there's two pieces to this. One is we will allow you to choose the context that's running in when applicable. And very specifically, this is things that are being triggered by a user. They could be, for example, initially running in user context. And I will say that we generally discourage you from running a flow in user context. And the reason is we like to think of the flow, the orchestration as doing things. It's not the user doing it. It is truly the business process that is doing it, right? For the most part, these are changes that are being, especially as far as the work items being created, the stages and steps being updated. These are all things that really the business process is doing. And the reason is you can have a number of what we call interactive steps. These are steps that have work to be done. Aaron's got to do something. Susanna's got to do something. And the problem is in standard flow, when a flow resumes because of a user action, a screen flow to be technical, it resumes in their context, right?
Right.
That's fine for a flow. It makes sense for a flow. But in orchestration, for example, you could have an interactive step for Susanna to fill out a form. And then the next step may be doing something that is based upon the information in that form, but Susanna has no idea of what's happening there. It's not actually in her control. And Susanna's, the user, may not have permissions to do that thing that the orchestration needs to do.
Right.
So in general, we encourage all orchestrations to be run in system mode. Right,
Okay.
it's the safer thing. That way, and then if you need it, of course, you can tweak. There's also tweaking with sharing that you can use to kind of tweak this. But I generally consider an anti-pattern, or at least it's a very difficult pattern to implement, to have different users potentially resuming the orchestration, because then you've got to be thinking about every user and their potential permissions, and then the next steps that are going to happen and how that plays with their permissions. So especially if you're an organization that has a relatively complex sharing or permission model, you're better off designing the orchestration in such a way that everything's going to run in system mode.
Two more questions. The first one, is there anything else you can share? So you mentioned that Orchestrator is, of course, built on the Flow engine, but there's some great things that are baked in. So this concept of the steps and having work items, which I assume is some sort of like abstracted object, some sort of something like that. What else is built in, sort of, that folks who are using Orchestrator are able to leverage? What other details can you share?
So, yep, we've got the what we call an orchestration run, and then we have the step and stage instances. Those are all standard record types. So an admin will be able to go in and see, for example, all of the orchestrations that are currently running, the status of them, where they are, what stage they're currently in. And in addition, there's some admin abilities that we allow there. For example, the reassignment of a work item. Susanna is supposed to be doing this work. She's on vacation for the next 2 weeks. The admin can go in and reassign it to Aaron, let him complete the work for her. Likewise, you can cancel orchestrations, for example. There's also some great debugging. You can actually go in and look at the status of an orchestration and see exactly where it is in the flow. You can see that it's down here, and you can see all of the inputs and outputs that have, for each of the steps up to that point. It really gives the admin the ability to have some insight into the state of the business process. We are also, in the coming year, especially going to be working on a lot of things, features around orchestration management, the ability for a user with a special permission to go in and kind of have more insight into the state of the orchestrations. Again, right now, all of that is based on admin. And so obviously, anyone using it at the moment should plan on admins being the people that do that, but they can go in, they can reassign the work items, they can cancel the orchestrations, they can debug the state of the current orchestrations as well.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely safe harbor, but that sounds like additional, right, benefits of using this out of the box set of tools rather than, like we mentioned, creating some bespoke set of objects that handle state.
Absolutely.
For your own,
you can imagine if you had records and then Apex actions that were getting fired. If you wanted to try and figure out how your business process had actually gotten to the state it's currently in,
yeah,
oh my God, like almost impossible, right?
Right, or trace back where you are in the process, where it broke down.
Or you're going to build some super complex logging system of your own. Which is actually a great additional mention. Every orchestration run actually has a log also, which shows all of its interactions. So you can also, even without going into debug view, and this is stored forever. So this is truly a system of record, and it's intended as use as such. So whether it's for legal reasons or just historical reasons within the company, you have a record of exactly why these changes happened on records, why these things were fired. So
excellent. So I actually have 2 more questions now. So first, I love how you talked about business process management being really the driver of why this product even came into existence. So in your opinion, what are some anti-patterns of business processes?
It's another very powerful feature of Orchestrator that the Flow does not have, is you can have multiple steps running in parallel. You can have lots of things happening. You can have one very long running process over here and a bunch of short, fired off processes going over here. Very powerful features, very, very difficult to model in the existing Flow Flow system. So super powerful, but also you've got to be careful. You've got to be thinking about how all of your steps are going to play together. So I would say always, always, always draw out your business process first. Don't just dive straight in and start building it, right? Whatever modeling tool you like to use, definitely have like a really good model. Think about the timing of things, think about the interrelation, think about, when something completes, what does that mean for everything else around it?
Right. Sync versus async, considerations like that.
Yes. The other one I would call out is error states.
Yes.
Almost always when I'm looking at orchestrations and flows built by customers or even built internally by Salesforce, one of the things that always stands out is the lack of error handling, right? Really think about what happens when this stage fails. What does that mean for the overall orchestration or the overall flow? How do I handle that? Is it recoverable? Is it a matter of looping back up somewhere higher in my flow and having them repeat something? Yep. Totally valid, right? And then on that, there's essentially 2 major patterns that you can use for your error handling, since we're talking about that. Yeah. One is to have like one central error handling element, if you will, and all errors kind of funnel into that. Simpler to design, you've only got one element there. It's easy, but of course it hinders your ability to have bespoke handling, right? So what you'll sometimes see is they'll have the single error handling, and then they'll loop all the way back to the top of the flow or the orchestration, and then have it basically start repeating down from the top and have noted maybe where it failed before. And so it skips the steps until it gets there. I personally really don't like that pattern very much because I think if you go back and look at like your debug view, it's very confusing because you just see all of these
tracing
no
back.
op, with a bunch of no ops going through, no op, no op, no op. Oh, here I am again. It's bulkier to design possibly, but I'm much more a fan of individual bespoke error handling nodes for all of your actions. That really lets the user or the admin tailor exactly how they want to handle each of the errors, and it helps you get right back in. If assuming you need to loop back in, lets you go right back very specifically where you need to go there.
Definitely. Definitely that again, most direct path in engineering coming back. Like you can go through this like sort of looping mechanism, but
Oh,
why
it's so
abruptly?
hard to maintain, right? I think
Yeah.
it's just really it may be easier for the person designing it at the beginning, but I
Yep.
think for long-term maintenance.
Definitely. Yeah. One sort of quick hit. Okay, so I know Flow now has asynchronous paths, like you can indicate whether you want it to operate async or sync, but Orchestrator, obviously there's more advanced sync async capabilities, correct?
Uh-huh. So yeah, we have, as I said, we have steps. These are the things that actually do something in Orchestrator, and we have two kinds of step. We have the interactive step, which is work for Susanna, work for Aaron. That's sitting out there asynchronously waiting for that user to complete it, right? And that can sit out there. They essentially, currently the notification method is they get an email. They click on that email. Eventually, they go and do the work. Great. They
Got
can
it. Yep.
also, the user can also see a list of all work items that are assigned to them. And the work items will also actually show up into the to-do list. So if you're an organization that leverages the to-do list component, your work items that are assigned to you will also show up in the to-do list.
Got it.
Then we have the background step, which is essentially what we consider any work that is not a user interactive. This could be a call to an external service. This could be an internal flow that's updating records and doing other things. And a background step can be set to be asynchronous or not. If it's synchronous, we're just going to run it in line. That's
Yep.
usually applicable to, a small flow that's just updating some records or something like that. Asynchronous is perfect for making your external callouts, right?
Right.
You need to go out and this system may return to you weeks, months, years, or minutes later, right? And I also want to give a plug for our newest edition, which is the MuleSoft step. And this is a specific step just to encompass a MuleSoft action so that you don't have to go and build all the pieces around that. It's already built in. So we're
Very
very
cool.
excited about that.
Awesome. Okay. So, final question, Erin. Would love to leave folks with some advice on how folks can use Orchestrator to build more composable solutions. Some one takeaway maybe for everyone to leave with.
Yep. So again, I really think the notion of separating out your overall business process from the individual flows, trying not to mix them together, right? Like have each of the flows be really a discrete piece of business logic, again, which can be versioned in its own right. As opposed to the overall orchestration. Orchestration can also be versioned, of course, but again, really this notion of being able to handle your separation of concerns, right?
Yes.
Let the HR people worry about the HR stuff. Let the IT people worry about the IT stuff. So that would be my number one takeaway.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time. And thank you all for watching. And we will be back very soon with some more Salesforce Under the Hood. Thanks.